Heyo, welcome to Painted Plastic People. My name is Charles, and I help aspiring and beginner miniature painters learn to save time and money by teaching them to paint fast and effective. And in today's video, we're taking a deep dive into base coating, so let's do it to it. What is base coating? Well, basically what you're going to do is you're going to block in your miniature with all the colors you plan to use. Essentially what you're doing is laying the foundations, the groundwork for the miniature going forward. You don't really have to worry about being too messy here. Honestly, mistakes that get made here are so easy to clean up because you haven't really done a whole lot of work into the miniature. So don't worry about making too many mistakes, and even if you do make some mistakes, don't worry about it. It's paint, you can just paint right over it. There's not really a whole lot to say about base coating. All that explanation I just did that's it, really. So unlike my priming video, if you haven't watched that, you should go check that out. Whereas my priming video was very heavy on instructional, here's your options, here's the ways you can go. Base coating is really just, here it is. So this video is going to be very tips and tricks heavy. So my first tip for you is to plan your color scheme. Before you even get into miniature painting, doing your base coating, you should really get into planning your color scheme first. The best way to do this is, if this is an existing intellectual property, think Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, something like that, you can go based off of the artwork or the movies or what have you, and just use that as a reference to go forward. So that can be very easy if you're painting something in those worlds. If you're looking to make something a little more custom, you're looking to do your own thing with your own army, the best thing you can do is come up with a color scheme ahead of time. Now, I know you're probably thinking is like, Charles, how do I come up with a color scheme? Well, the best thing you can do here is what I do, which is I go and I find sports teams and I look at their uniforms. The way I look at it is someone was professionally paid to make these things look appealing and catch people's eyes. For instance, my favorite hockey team is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and their color scheme is very basic. It's a very dark blue with a white. Now the white pops and it looks great. That's a really simple color scheme you can apply to any miniature. If you had a Space Marine, for instance, you paint them all dark blue like they usually do get painted, and then on his shoulder pad accents or that little fin on his head, you could paint it white, and that would give it a real good pop. You could even do his kneecaps and maybe the soles of his boots as well. So my next tip is the inside out method. So what this is you paint a miniature from the hardest to reach areas out to the easiest to reach areas. You can minimize any mistakes you might make. You're painting the upper layers last, so that way your paintbrush isn't going into the recesses. This way you make less mistakes, you have to do less touch-ups, and you don't have to try and sneak a brush into a hard to reach area as well and accidentally hit the upper layers that you've already painted. So this can save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of just frustration as well. This tip is 2 thin coats. Now what you're going to do here is when you go to paint your miniature, you're going to take your paint and instead of just glooping your paint onto the miniature, you're going to take 2 thin coats and you're going to go over with it the first time. It's probably not going to look like you got enough coverage. It's going to maybe have some primer sticking through, or maybe it just looks really thin. That's okay, that's the point. You're going to go over with the second coat, and that's going to really get that look you're going for. It's going to make your paint job look even more solid, and it's going to help for all the processes of the next steps you're going through. You're going to be able to tell where all the shade's going to be going more easily. You're going to be able to not lose those details so that when you go to do your highlights, it's going to look so much nicer. You're going to know right where to go with everything. So my next tip for you is to limit your paint palette. What I mean by this is not limiting your paints that you have at your disposal, but limiting the paints that you're using on your model. Now, by doing this, the less paints you're using, the more time you're saving. And also, if you limit yourself by not using a huge rainbow of colors, you're also getting more comfortable with the colors you are using. So what you can do to get interest, instead of adding more colors, adding like red that wasn't used before, or blue or green or whatever, you could just instead mix colors on your palette to get different interest that way. This can really save you a lot of time, potentially, and this can also make you maybe get a little more advanced off the get-go, and maybe make you a little more open to experimentation. And leading on from that is my next point, which is don't be afraid to make mistakes. And don't be afraid to experiment either. So the best painters in the world, they make mistakes all the time. Same as you. It's just they've maybe have more of a mindset of I've made a mistake and I'm learning from it. That's the kind of mindset I want you to take, is to just learn from any mistakes you might make. Just keep going, keep working through it. Just try to get a little bit better each time. And don't be afraid to experiment either, because experimentation can lead to all sorts of different things. So for instance, in this miniature I painted, I was originally planning to paint his mouth black and then use his tongue for red. I put the red on, thinking that it would go on just pretty easily. The red would overpower the black, but of course I forgot that red doesn't overpower black ever. Instead, I had to change tactics and I had to apply white to the miniature. What ended up happening though was the red didn't actually dry yet, and I ended up actually getting this nice weird purple color to go for my undead miniature. So don't be afraid to experiment. Sometimes you have, as Bob Ross would say, happy accidents. So good old Spike here was wondering that if you're getting any help from this video, maybe you'd hit the like button down below. And if you have a favorite tip so far, to put it down in the comments. So anyway, let's get back to her. Next up, I would say take breaks often. I don't want you stopping every 5 minutes, of course, but I do want you to maybe stop every about an hour or so. Just maybe stand up, stretch, go play with the dog for a minute, go play with some cats, or go kiss your significant other, or what have you. Just get a drink of water or something. Just take a break, because sometimes this stuff can really take a bit of a toll on our bodies and a bit of a toll on our minds. Sometimes we get our heads so wrapped up in something, and it's a good idea to take a break and kind of clear your head for the moment. The next tip I would say for you is to, put something on the background, whether that be music, an audiobook, a podcast, whatever you want, even just some videos on YouTube. Just get something on in the background that can help you kind of pass the time. Things don't seem so bad when you're painting and you've got something else going on. Painting in silence is really, really tough. I know personally, for me, it just kind of makes it seem like it's dragging on and on and on. When is this going to end? But if I'm listening to like an audiobook, some music or whatever, this really helps me out. So it helps me pass the time. And you're also, if you're listening to an audiobook or a podcast or watching some videos, you're also multitasking. You can get two things done at once. You might get that book finished off while you're also painting. Up next is using a bigger brush. Honestly, this is just a really good idea. You can cover more of a surface area with a bigger brush. You don't have to go back to your palette all the time with a bigger brush, because a bigger brush can hold more paint in it. And when you're using techniques like wet blending, having a bigger brush can cover more of a surface area so your blend looks more natural. I know what you're thinking. You're like, Charles, look at the size of this miniature. It's so small. Why am I using a bigger brush? It's not that I don't want you to use a smaller brush. It's just that smaller brushes are meant more for small details. Things like eyes or weird little blemishes on your miniature's face, or weird little like pustules or pimples, gross stuff like that. But you want to use a bigger brush to cover more of a surface area, get those more natural strokes, get those more natural looks. It's fine to use a smaller brush, but the smaller brush you're going to keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you're going to leave small tiny streaks because your paint doesn't hold up as much, so you're running out of it and it's creating this real streaky, gross texture on your miniature. Whereas if you use a bigger brush, you're getting that surface area coverage, you're getting everything you need. Next on the horizon is the arm's reach rule. And what is this? Well, the arm's reach rule is this. If you're painting your miniature and you keep trying to fix a mistake but it won't go, or you're doing some highlights and you feel like the transitions aren't right, or you're doing something and you just feel like it doesn't look right and people are going to notice and it's going to be horrible, I want you to take your miniature and just put it out about an arm's reach away from you on the table. If you're playing like a war game and your army's out there in combat or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. At this distance, if you can't see that mistake, and I mean really see it without, knowing that it's there and looking for it, then I would say just move on, really. Nobody's going to be cross-examining your miniature like that, And if people don't know that that little blemish or mistake is there, they're not going to be looking for it, so they're less likely to notice it. This is a rule that's really helped me in my miniature painting over the years. I learned it pretty early on, so it's really helped me out. It's really sped up my time. It's really helped me kind of just ignore the little mistakes. Next tip I have for you rolling in is that your miniature is going to look like garbage for most of the time you're painting it. And I mean this from the priming stage, base coating, shading, and most of the highlights, to be honest. The thing is that miniature painting, our minis don't look the greatest all the time, and they're not going to look the greatest, so I don't want you to get discouraged. I don't want you to be put out, and I don't want you to feel like you're not good enough, because you are good enough. And the fact is, this is just part of the process. Once you get closer to the end, or you're right at the end, that's when your miniature is going to really come to life, and that's when it's going to really show you that you did do a good thing by putting your time into doing this. Now here's the most important tip that I've ever learned, that I think that you should take if you take any tip from this video and really master it, is this: don't compare yourself to others. I know it's really easy to look at anything I've painted, anything anyone else on the internet has painted, and really just go, wow, that's leagues above what I'll ever be able to accomplish. That's so much better than what I can do. The fact is, you shouldn't compare yourself to those people. Honestly, it's just not good for your mental health. It's not good for your work that you're putting out. I want you to focus on making yourself happy with your painting. Now, I don't mean you need to be overjoyed with every single miniature you make. Maybe you're mostly happy with what you've got done. Maybe just this or that needs a little bit of a touch up. But honestly, just as long as you're mostly happy with, just take the stuff you're not as happy with, learn from it, get that a little bit better, that just 1%, that's it. Just need to do 1% better on the next model. And that way you'll be happier and healthier. And you'll be, before you know it, you'll be painting miniatures. They'll be flying off the shelves. You'll be knocking that gray plastic army down one soldier at a time, one mini at a time. And I'll be right here in the trenches cheering you on. So hey, just a reminder that this was part 3 of our 6-part How to Paint a Miniature. This was the in-depth look at base coating. Next week will be an in-depth look at washing and shading your miniature. And I hope you want to stick around. Leave a like down below if you like this video. Subscribe if you really enjoyed it. Share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with whoever you want. And just remember to stay tuned for more. And remember to get it to the table and have a good day.